Hi everyone. On this episode of Mixing with Mercs, we're going to be preparing a recipe that would be great for any holiday gathering if you're looking for something that's not quite as traditional. This is a lasagna that's made with whipped feta. So feta cheese adds a little bit of a flavor punch that you might not be used to in lasagna, and there's also some spinach added in as well. This recipe has become one of my favorites, and it's prepared in a 6-inch hotel pan, which means that it's super thick. The first thing we're going to prepare is the meat sauce. So to start out, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to a small stock pot on medium-high heat on the stove. And it helps if this pot has a lid. Then you're going to add a medium diced onion to this pan and cook it until it's slightly brown. You're going to know it's ready to go when the onions are starting to get clear and the edges are getting brown. You don't want to let this go too long though, because you don't want to add a burned flavor to your final sauce. After that, you're going to add in a teaspoon each of Italian seasoning, garlic powder, and onion powder. And we are going to be adding in fresh garlic later on, and we've already added in the fresh onion, but this is going to just add a little bit of in-depth flavor to it as well. So this just adds a little bit of a flavor punch. And you're going to cook that with the onion until you start to smell it and it gets a little bit fragrant. Then you're going to add in a pound of ground beef and cook that until brown. If you don't want to do this with ground beef, you can use ground sausage, ground turkey, whatever your family enjoys. It's important to brown at each of these steps because once you add liquid into the recipe, you can't get the flavor back that you would have gotten in these browning steps. So it's really important whenever you are making a sauce or a soup or anything to brown whenever you have the chance so that you're able to get that flavor in there. You're going to blot a little bit of the fat out with a paper towel, but don't take all of it out because fat is going to bring a little bit of flavor to the recipe, so don't take all of the fat out. Then you're going to add 3 tablespoons of fresh chopped basil and about a tablespoon of minced garlic. We didn't add that in earlier because we want to keep a little bit of the freshness of the basil, and we also don't want to burn the garlic. Garlic has a lot of sugar in it, and so we don't want to burn that. Once those have cooked a little bit, you're going to add 2 28-ounce cans of canned tomatoes. This can be in any form that you like. I'm using diced, but you can use whole tomatoes or even fresh tomatoes if you'd like to. Whatever form works for you is going to work in this recipe. Then you're going to cover it and move it to the back of the stove and saute your spinach for the recipe. So we're going to add another tablespoon of olive oil to another skillet and get that heating up. Then you're going to add about 2 teaspoons of minced garlic into the pan and let that saute until it gets a little bit brown. But we're going to start adding the spinach in pretty quickly because we don't want your garlic to burn. Burnt garlic smells and tastes very bad and very bitter. So you're going to add 16 ounces of fresh spinach in there, and you're going to just keep on stirring it and adding it in as your pan fills up. And add your spinach in and stir it until all of it's added and all of it is evenly cooked. So now we're going to go about making what is the star of this dish. Feta cheese is a salty cheese that tastes amazing in this recipe, but we're going to need to add some other cheeses into it just because it's a pretty intense flavor. So what you're going to do is with your stand mixer, add your paddle attachment on, and then you're going to take 32 ounces of whole milk ricotta and add that into your mixing bowl. Then you're going to add 12 ounces of feta and 8 ounces of cream cheese. And you're going to start to mix that on medium speed until it's well combined. And you're going to want to scrape down occasionally, going all the way to the bottom just to make sure that it continues to mix all of that together. And you'll probably want to scrape down a couple of times. After that, you're going to switch to the whip attachment, which is the one that looks like a whisk. And then you're going to whip it up until it gets fluffy and starts to get some air incorporated into it and looks a little bit more in volume than it did before. Then you're just going to scrape that into a bowl and set it aside until you're ready to assemble your lasagna. So now we are ready to assemble lasagna. One of the most important things when you're assembling it is to make sure you have everything ready to go before you start. So the first thing is to grate our own cheese. When you buy cheese, it already has a coating on it that keeps it from melting as cleanly. So I always try to grate my own, and one of the quickest ways to do that is with a food processor. Follow your manufacturer's guidelines for using your food processor and don't bypass any of your safety protections on it. It might take you a little bit and you need to be super careful with it, but it goes a lot faster than grating by hand. So we're going to gather all of our ingredients for assembly before we start assembling. Just because you're not going to want to wash your hands a lot of times, you want to make sure that everything is ready to go. So the ingredients we're going to need are some oven-ready lasagna noodles. We're not using the ones that you pre-boil because there's enough water in the recipe already with the sauce and the feta and the spinach that you won't have to pre-boil these. And we're using the meat sauce you prepared, the whipped feta, the spinach that you sauteed, and then your grated mozzarella. And make sure that you have all of those ready for yourself and that you have all of the things to serve those items, your scoops, and your rubber spatulas to spread with. So it's a good idea to wear gloves for this process just because you might need to use your hands to press the noodles down. And also you want to spray your pan because washing this is going to be very difficult if you don't. So we're going to start out with a little bit of sauce on the bottom just to coat the bottom of the pan. And then on top of that, you're going to add 3 noodles over the sauce. And you overlap the wavy sides of the noodles just to kind of interlock them. And using a hotel pan is great because the lasagna noodles are actually just the right size to fit in there. And that's not going to happen if you're using a lot of commercially available stuff that you would buy for the household. After that, you're going to add another thin layer of sauce and then a thin layer of the whipped feta. I like to use a scoop for distributing that around. Then you're going to sprinkle on a little bit of your spinach and then a little layer of cheese. We're not using as much for this layer because this is kind of like your base, and so we're not using as much as we will use for each of the later layers. Then you're going to add a layer of noodles and a layer of your sauce. Making sure to get the sauce all the way to the edges and to cover all of your noodles. Then we're going to do another layer of noodles, a layer of your whipped feta, and then a little bit of your spinach and mozzarella. Make sure you're spreading all the way to the edges. Then we're going to go with the layer of noodles again. And I'm pressing down a little bit just to compact it and spreading the sauce out all the way to the edges. Then we're doing a layer of noodles, a layer of whipped feta, and the rest of your spinach. A layer of noodles, and then the remainder of the sauce. I ended up running low on sauce, and so if that happens to you, you can just add some extra canned tomatoes to fill it out. Then we're going to add a really good layer of mozzarella cheese on top of there. And I'm pretty generous with this layer because this is going to be the top of our lasagna. And then I press it down. And try to get as much of it off of the edges as you can just for the ease of cleaning. Cover it with foil, and then I love to use the lids for the hotel pans just to give it an extra seal, but if you don't have a lid, that's okay too. You're going to bake it at 350 for 45 minutes covered up just to protect the top of that cheese. And then you're going to remove the foil and bake it for an additional 15 to 25 minutes until the top looks brown and crispy, like you want your lasagna to look. Then you're going to end up with this gorgeous lasagna that is super thick and ends up tasting amazing. As you can see from our layers, we've got lots of spinach in there, lots of good cheese. Thank you so much for watching Mixing with Mercs. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if you try this recipe. The recipe is going to be in the video description down below.